signs in Leos.
Guys, I'm super excited to bring on a guest who we haven't had on the podcast for quite some time now. He's a great friend of mine, someone who's really just helped me learn so much about the hobby, so much about the history of leopard geckos, and is really just a legend within our community. So, Ron Tremper, welcome back to the podcast. How's it going, Ron?
Super great. Greetings from southern Costa Rica here at 4,400 feet in 35 acres of cloud rainforest near the Panamanian border.
That's awesome. I think you're our first guest down in South America. So you could say that you're the first guest on the podcast who's in that part of the world.
Woohoo! All right.
Nice. Well, Ron, again, it's been a while since you've been on the podcast. The last time you were on, you actually released the new Bay morph, which is crazy to think that new morph is out there and that release happened on the podcast. But what have you been up to since moving down to, Costa Rica and being there and leaving from the States?
Well, I still have my books. I have a friend in Texas shipping those, so I handle book orders. That's not a lot of work, just something through PayPal, and we still ship a couple of books worldwide, and now they're available, as a digital download. Then I've kept a group of cherry-head redfoots I've had from 85 that I co-own with a dear friend of over 40 years. A lot of people don't know that I'm a turtle and tortoise guy at heart. And although I loved all the years with the leopard geckos, but the cherry-head redfoots are with a friend in Texas, and he's happy to give them back to me if and when we get back to the States. So, here we just see reptiles kind of catch and release. There's Fairdalance, a real neat superciliaris, a viper, tree viper that's here, pretty common, coral snakes, the big giant king snake that turns black with age. That triangulum is very impressive. We've got a ton of different amphibians, and bird life is crazy good. I just live in a big terrarium. I love insects, particularly butterflies and beetles, and I used to collect beetles for years, and so we've got the big rhinoceros beetle that comes in here, and I have a black light, and it's just a great thing.
Right, we were kind of joking before the podcast was recording, and we are saying now you're in a huge terrarium now, and now that you're not keeping anything for yourself in a terrarium, you're kind of the one who's out there living in an amazing biosphere.
Exactly, it's a lot of fun. I take a walk. There's several over a mile of trails through the property, and we keep it real natural here. Most surrounding areas at this elevation have been all cut down years ago for their timber and for cattle grazing. So there was a Dutch couple that had this place many years ago, and it's changed hands with a few other expats over the years. But we're blessed to be the current guardians of a big piece of paradise here.
That's so cool. So kind of just being down there, what has been, if you could pick one favorite thing or one part of that experience that's been your favorite so far, what do you think it's been?
Perpetual spring. It's like 72 to 84 degrees every day of the year. 6 months a year, it rains 15 feet in that period. And we're just coming towards an end of the rainy season. But I love perpetual spring. I love all the everything that the spring time brings. There's a lot of tranquility here on this much, my nearest neighbor. Yeah, I can see a roof, 400 yards away, but it's very tranquil and no crime, no problems. It's, we're a 6-hour drive from the capital, so we want to fly somewhere. It's an adventure getting, it's just a lot of driving back and forth and stuff, but love it. Yeah, just peace and tranquility. I must say that I'm starting to miss keeping and breeding some reptile species, but that'll be down the line.
Yeah, definitely. And it's kind of crazy to think about just how long you were been in the herpetoculture arena and just in the hobby of just breeding so many amazing species of everything from like bearded dragons to chameleons to leopard geckos to tortoises. Like you've kind of done it all. And now that you've stepped away from it, it must just really feel weird not doing that.
Yeah, a little bit. Anybody that's kept things for a long time knows that the big issues is all the insect care or dealing with rodents or whatever, greens, depending on what type of herbs you're keeping, and all the cleaning and keeping, and running a commercial thing is quite an effort. But I really enjoyed it. Many years. I left the zoo profession in '83, kind of on top of the heap at that time in the zoo profession as far as reptile facilities and breeding. So I took those good works and just followed my dream of doing reptile ranching. And now I've cut back, but I think that next year we're going to go ahead and move back to the States. It's just the best thing to do at this point in time, and it's a big decision, we haven't made lightly, but I think it's best for my wife Helen, and I have no regrets. January will have been 3 years down here, and who knows how long it'll take to sell this place. But I think it will happen next year, and we're kind of thinking about maybe inland Florida to kind of get a little hedge on the hurricane winds and problems south of Gainesville. A lot of herp friends there. Tom Crutchfield and Ron St. Pierre doing fabulous work. And I have a good friend, Kevin Beckert, there that we pioneered the reptile habitat cages for tetrafauna together. So, I know a ton of people down there, and we haven't closed the door on Texas. I was there 25, 26 years. I might go back to the hill country. It just kind of depends, but kind of ready for another adventure. And I think that, of course, I parted with the business entirely to Julie Bergman, and she's done a great job. I agreed to hold her hand through it all, and of course, that wasn't something she asked. It was something I offered, and we work almost every week together on updating projects, pricing, how to present stuff to the herp community on a web page. And so she totally owns leopardgecko.com and got top representatives of all the lines Helen and I were working with. I just utilize the page on the book orders and help out Julie. So she's doing a great job. She's got her hands full with her own gecko ranch and, going through employees and stuff like that. And they had COVID and so, but she's one of those persons that gets up in the morning and doesn't have to be told what to do, or, she's self-motivated like I've been all these years. When you're in business for yourself, if you're going to succeed, you have to be that way. So she's doing great things.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's really a lot that's been going on in the past few years, and even just the changes in your personal life, and then also with just leopardgecko.com and how everything's just continuing to do well for everything. Like leopardgecko.com is great. You're doing great. So it's good that pretty much everything that you've done this far is still flourishing and still thriving today.
Yeah, I'm really grateful for it. And it's, Julie keeps me very involved. She wants me involved. She needs my help. It's a handful dealing with all this genetics and getting a different mindset for a species that seems pretty simple on the face of it. But when you get into all the genetics and the way to explain things and the hets and the polygenic traits and things, it takes some time. So we work together. It's, keeping my legacy alive. And I won't be doing leopard geckos if I go back to the States. that wouldn't be fair to Julie, and I wouldn't consider it whatsoever. But I think, some naughtiness and some small species of more rare monitor lizards keep my tortoises going a bit, but not too much, not a big overload like thousands of animals and needing help. And it gets overwhelming. And I'm 71 now. It's time to do a little more travel, get around to see friends and family, spend some time in Europe. I've got some things on my bucket list I want to do, and so I'm excited about it, really. But I'm not just sitting around waiting for a buyer here, enjoying this property, enjoying my friends, and traveling around Costa Rica. And Quetzal Dwyer just sold his Reptilandia near Dominical. Spent a lot of time there with him, and we've had a few reptile trips. He's now sold that entity and started the Reptile Lagoon adventure there that's almost done near Johnson City, Texas. And it's kind of ironic. He moved within 40 minutes where I used to live, and now I've moved where he has moved off from. So who knows? We may end up in Texas together, but really focusing on a Florida adventure. But keeping up with everything here.
Yeah, that's super awesome. Like Florida is just it's kind of like the herper's paradise. If you're here in the States, there's so many just awesome people who have contributed to herpetoculture in Florida. The people that you named are super awesome, and there's just like herps everywhere. No matter where you look, there's iguanas, gators you could check out, and just a great place to even have herps outdoors, which is, I know you're a big fan of, and something that you did in Texas.
Yeah, I like the outdoor exposure is essential, and get better behavior and health of the animals and bigger cages and so forth. So I'm a big fan of that, and we just have to see. My daughter and her family live in Boca Raton, so it might be a time to spend some years ahead with them. My son and his family were near Fort Worth, and we were in Texas for 2.5 decades, as you know. So, yeah, it's all good. My health's good. I feel very positive, and there's be some great things ahead, I'm sure.
Before we go on, I want to say thank you to our sponsors. Impeccable Gecko is a small to mid-sized family-operated hobbyist breeder operation. They specialize in leopard geckos with high-quality genetics. Their goal is to provide customers with the absolute best animals that they could produce, coupled with honest and transparent business methods. At Impeccable Gecko, integrity and animal welfare are above all else. Impeccable Gecko is a strong supporter of the Strength and Leos podcast, so follow them on social media and check out what they have available. John of Gecko Boa started early, like most of us, catching lizards and snakes in his backyard at any chance he got. Over the years, he has kept and bred more than 80 species of reptiles. In recent years, his focus has turned to specializing within the genus Eublepharus. He has worked hard to pioneer some of the most cutting-edge leopard geckos while maintaining genetic purity and honesty. He also keeps the most diverse collection of pure Eublepharus species in the world. He has coordinated with biologists around the world and has contributed DNA sampling and distribution range info to help sort out the cladistic relationships within the genus. Check out geckoboa.com for more info and available geckos. Suburban Geckos is operated by Chris Charlton. Chris's passion and enjoyment for herpetoculture, and more specifically leopard geckos, drove the desire to take his hobby to the next level. With experience in breeding and raising reptiles well over 20 years, Chris is dedicated to producing quality animals for both the hobbyist and breeder alike. Suburban Geckos treats each animal with the utmost care and respect, and cuts no corners when it comes to health and integrity of their geckos. What started off as just a couple aquariums has grown into quite the collection in just a few years, and they wouldn't have it any other way. The dedication to their animals is unparalleled and evident in the quality and health of their animals that they produce. Exemplary customer service is another area where they excel. They're readily available to answer any questions you may have regarding their animals, husbandry, and etc. For more info and to see their availability, check out suburbangeckos.com. Lizzie Bold Leos, while new to the scene, is taking strides in following the footsteps of top-tier breeders and keepers in care and ethics while aspiring to bring fresh looks and crosses to explore latent potential. Prior to becoming a breeder, Greg of Blizzy Bold Leos completed hours of extensive research on lines, ethics, morphs, and how certain traits interact with others in order to begin projects which are coming to fruition already in the second season of breeding. With a major focus on line breeding the correct way and customer service done right, Blizzy Bold Leos aspires to be a breath of fresh air to the customers and keepers they encounter. Be sure to check out their Instagram, Blizzy Bold Leos, and stay up to date on project development, availability, or just tips on having healthy animals in your care. Dab Exotics is a hobbyist breeding operation that was started in 2017. They specialize in producing healthy leopard geckos from top quality genetics. Dab Exotics is an awesome supporter of the Strength in Leos podcast, so follow them on social media and check out what they have available for sale. Shane Kelly is a blue-collar, working-class guy that has a reptile breeding business with his wife and kids. They are currently working with high-quality ball python morphs, western hognose snakes, and select leopard geckos with a focus on bold stripes, and they're looking forward to adding Albie Snow and Ghost this year. They have been listening to the podcast since the beginning and are proud to be a Season 4 sponsor. Go check out their social media, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, and also check out their morph market to see what they have available. So when it comes to just the leopard geckos, and I know we kind of talked about Julian handling, just basically having that collection and giving it all to Julie. So in terms of morphs and things like that, like how have you noticed a difference in giving that collection to her and kind of the new morphs that she's introducing into the projects that you already had working with, and mixing the classic projects that you had as well as kind of the new things that have been coming up into the hobby and new things that she's added into the collection as she took it over?
Yeah. Well, originally, of course, the BAE, that new eye mutation, was a random thing that came out of a project of Helen's with the Bell line. And, of course, we already started thinking ahead. One of the things I tell people is to think as if. If you're not sure you have something's het for a certain trait you're looking for, just build a project and start breeding as if it was, because that way you don't lose a year or two and say, oh, shucks, I should have started this earlier. Look, I did have it. So, in those regards, the mutations and all that we passed on to Julie, one of the things we had started along that way of thinking was to get some no-hat tangerine, just sort of real pretty no-hat normals, and which I got from John Scarborough, someone I could trust, and because we wanted to make the move that eye gene into a real nice tangerine line, which Julie got the first one or two last year, and is now selling them online. And they're really cool, and it just shows you can move that eye gene onto any of the other morphs, besides when it's meets the snow or something. So she's doing a good job. One of the other projects that Helen and I were focusing on 3.5 years ago, when we decided to move the collection to Julie, was to do a supergiant Black Knight. And so she's probably 2 years away from that, but she's well on her way with it. I've been helping her with that. And of course, everybody knows you've got to have meticulous record keeping, keep track of things, and make sure, that what is what genetically, so you're not selling something that's supposed to be het and is not, or this or that. So, that's one of the big projects she's working on now. The other thing that I noticed is everybody was racing towards trying to get a different morph or this or that, new genes, new polygenic traits. About 10 years ago, I decided to just kind of go back and make each morph and combo morphs the best they could be. In other words, improve what you have, take it up a notch. And so I was really proud of sort of the blood bells that Helen was working on. They're just, and then putting striped into that. And you got lavender striped blood bells is with golds and oranges and lavender. It's an impressive beast. And just making the eclipse, another cut above, putting some white and yellow stuff in that, and snow and so forth. So, yeah, it's just I really encourage people to, try to improve what they have. It's always nice to be able to get the next, morph that fits your budget. And I always worked on sort of the idea of having, 3 things that were breeding well and that were supporting us, even within the leopard geckos. I had my spotted turtles, and so the projects are, not all about just the next thing, just trying to keep things improved. I think that the market has been a little soft, actually. I think that, there was several events that occurred that kind of scared people a bit. And in my opinion, that was the recession that started. And a lot of people were left with their animals the following year and needed to dump them, ran out of space, food budget, so forth. And who could blame them? We really had to adjust during that period and take our business to Asia to keep things going, but not everybody else could do that and follow the market there. So that set things back on their heels a bit. And then running into all that, and not to be political, but it's just the fact of the matter, I feel very strongly that the lemon frost debacle really set a lot of people back. And because a lot of these households involve a significant other or a family member, like a father-in-law or somebody that helps support or finance big projects. And when those get set back, that can be something that is hard to revisit for families. So I think that the market ahead is it feels soft to me out there. I keep track of that, and of course the friends at shows they're trying to sell and all, but I wouldn't let it discourage anyone. Every industry goes through its highs and lows. We had one of our really a huge boost to the whole industry. I think it was with the different albino lines occurring, with the Tremper albino coming out for sale in '99, followed soon thereafter by Rainwater and Bell. It gave a huge boost in excitement and started people thinking about combo morphs. So from about 1999 to the recession, which kind of got started in 2000, and I guess it was 6, or really got to be a problem by 2008 for the industry. It was really a huge high point those 10 years with the the eclipse gene and the albino version of that being the raptor. So having all black eyes, all red eyes, the supergiant gene came about then, and some other things. Good work by a lot of other breeders. Some really beautiful morphs with tangerines, and now the mandarin stuff has been a recent hit. So yeah, I think it's just going to take some time, and come up with some new genetics. They're the ball python industry has really showed quite a model of what can be up and down in a market, and all the different color and morph variations and stuff. I'm really really sure that leopard geckos are going to still be out there for a long time, Evan.
Yeah, and you would probably know more than anybody else really how the market has just changed and kind of gone through its ups and downs over the years, but you kind of have seen everything really, and you kind of know how the market goes up and down, but also you've seen the great points in the leopard gecko market where when morphs are being created and when high quality geckos are also being created, then there's always a market for people to continue to get into the hobby, want to breed leopard geckos, and really just want to explore and really continue to look at how many amazing morphs there are to be offered. So when it comes to just people's confidence and seeing that thing, like, have you noticed just over time that there are dips, but it always continues to trend upwards? Or what has your experience been over the many years that you've been into breeding?
Exactly. I mean, there was a point in time, I might have mentioned this on the last podcast, but it's been a while, where, we were producing thousands of just, you would call high yellow, just normal babies for the pet trade, mostly shipping 100 lots, like to Tyrone at Calzo, or strictly reptiles or Bronx reptiles when they were in business at the time all over the country, 100 at a time, hundreds overseas and all that. And then all of a sudden, it got to be like happened to Bearded Dragons there for a couple years. I mean, everybody was breeding their leopard geckos, giving away their babies to pet stores or for very little. And I remember talking to Chris at LA Reptile, and she said, "Ron, if you offered your babies to me for $1 each right now, I couldn't sell them." And so there's been lulls like that where suddenly you have several thousand animals that are just sitting around,
Yeah.
And that was, in the 80s. But yeah, it goes up and down, and yeah, people do pay attention. Let's face it, we don't need leopard geckos to breathe or eat or something, that's essential and necessity of life. But I think a lot of people, including myself, would argue that it's good for that emotional and mental appeal to have pets and a good strong hobby. And yeah, it's fluctuating, and wars and politics and different things can uh, affect people's attitude. They start spending, have less expendable income, start thinking twice about, investing into something when they haven't been on a vacation with themselves or the family for a while. So there's different priorities, different things that happen. But overall, you see a lot of beautiful stuff at the shows. There's a lot of neat, I'll call them new generation breeders in their 30s, that in late 20s and 30s that are really, taking it up a notch with the different quality. Color always sells.
Right.
I tell people that, and I think you've seen this too. Color sells. You can
Mhm.
have just if you have a 10.0 tangerine, it's going to be the first thing that sells off your table. And likewise, and it's always been ability of mine to kind of know the market and know what sells at what price. And you don't want to change your prices more than once a year. It's been a trademark of mine. People can count on my pricing and over all those years. and I knew how much the market could bear at what price, and then you have to think about, can you sell something that's this rare or this, quality? How many of those you can sell at what price? And that gets a little tricky. But for the average person at home that wants to do a few shows, sell things to friends that come over, or a little bit on the internet, even though Facebook has become difficult, there's other ways to sell, as you know, with the Morph Marketplace and so forth. But there's still room for, to support your hobby financially and all the cost of it, have fun with it. And it doesn't have to make money. It doesn't have to make a profit. I tell people, don't quit your day job.
Yeah, and that's something you've kind of been mentioning since the beginning. I remember you kind of had that, making sure not to just go straight to the bank and getting a loan and quit your day job without really counting the cost, and then also just making sure you don't overproduce more than you could sell and really just flood the market, or just really get rid of geckos when you can't really sell them or have a place to, get rid of those geckos.
I got a great story for you. I helped start the very first, Florida Expo there with Wayne Hill.
Mm-hmm.
There were 12 couples there in 1970 or so, 1980. And,
wow.
And so, to Howard Johnson in Orlando. And so, it got going, and I guess it was 89 or 90 actually. But at any rate, I was at 29 of those expos without missing one. And one of the cutest things I ever saw is I ran into this couple in the elevator, and you start chatting, they see your name, and they were real sweet, and they said, yeah, we've come from Ohio, and we this is our first year breeding, and we've got a table. And I said, well, good luck to you. What's the name of your outfit or table number? And so there was a little break in the action of the show, the usual stampede on Saturday. And then in the afternoon, it quiets down always around 2:30. And I went by their table to see them, and they weren't there. And so, there was just a sign, sold out, see you next year. And we sold our 3 geckos. It was so sweet. It was hilarious, right? They had heard that if you breed and everything, this was the place to go to sell your babies. So it was became imperative to them. They probably tied in a vacation, of course. I can't imagine. They came all the way from Ohio. But they had 3 geckos on their table. They sold out on Saturday, and see you next year. And it was, that was just a great thing. I'm laughing because it was so sweet. It was not a stupid thing, or wasn't that they were naive. It was just they were into it. That was their thing, and it pleased them. And to me, I'll never forget that story. And crazy, huh?
Yeah, and that's something you wouldn't see today, definitely.
Yeah, exactly. It costs a lot to go to the shows, and there's a lot of shows, and it's often though it's what happens behind the scenes that going out to dinner with people and chatting at the socials where you stumble upon someone that's going to be a new herp friend or a new customer, or it just gives you a different idea, and I still have a lot of neat herp adventures I'd like to do. And so, I think the expos are a great place to meet new people and show off what you're doing.
Yeah, definitely. And I think those are kind of the best memories you get throughout the year of being within the reptile community, is just going to those shows and really just networking and meeting a lot of cool people. And hopefully when you get back to the States, you could even go back to getting to some of the reptile shows as well. I think that'll be super awesome experience to see you at some of those shows.
Yeah, I'll definitely do that. Of course, if we end up in Florida, it'd be really easy to get to Daytona, and
Right.
uh, of course, we would sit at, be off and on sitting at Julie's table and represent the books a little bit, maybe, and help people with their ideas, and you're moving some geckos, just having some fun with that, and give her some encouragement and support. But no, I'm not out of it. I'm not out of it at all. I've kept up with everybody and renewed some contacts, and you know, it's easy to get reptiles. That is, when I was a kid, it was not easy to get reptiles. You had to search to find something in the wild, or search and search to find one to buy that was healthy. It was crazy,
Yeah.
in the late 60s and early 70s. It was just difficult to find herps. But now, it's easy to get herps. It's the systems, I always look at people's caging and ways, creative ways that they're dealing with the food items, and the way they can streamline their efforts. So that's always something that I'm interested in, and it's fun to visit other breeders and see how they're managing day to day.
Yeah, that is a good point. Like throughout the years, even you have kind of changed your caging systems and what you've
Yeah.
done from the past. But like, what are some things that you've noticed in caging, and just when it comes to large scale propagation and some of the things that people have just been changing and kind of streamlining over the years?
Yeah. I really noticed a push towards larger exhibits. You're not going to give a great big, huge thing to um, a trio or family of leopard geckos, but some people have some real neat things that are visually appealing, not just a blanket box with standard breeding setup, in their garage or reptile facility like I had. Um, Although we always had some things in the house that were set up nicely, but there's a real trend people be able to do some more and better size enclosures, which are key to keeping and breeding a lot of these animals, and keeping them stress free. For a crocodile monitor, you really need a bedroom size cage that's outside,
Right, right.
and a lot of these, even colubrid snakes, they can get really overweight in the blanket boxes, and because they don't exercise, have to move around a lot like in nature and expend some calories to get their food and do mating. Um, they have trouble passing their eggs, or in leopard geckos, it's been shown many times to me where people just first get into it and are often pinkies and lots of waxworms, and get the especially the females obese, and once they get so obese, they won't lay fertile eggs. They won't sometimes even ovulate, because nature is saying, hey, it's a really great year. Look at all this metabolic gold mine we've hit here in the way of fat reserves, and
Yeah.
and they and they don't produce. So yeah, outdoor caging that's definitely been a trend, or people giving larger setups in their house or basement or reptile facility. If they're more northern latitudes, or in Europe, you can't have stuff outside like you could do in Texas and the southern latitudes, California and Florida and all. And it's a year-round affair down there in South Florida, south of Miami, in that area. Like you were saying, everything under the sun is loose there, foreign species and invasives and so forth. But yeah, there's a real trend towards doing quality exhibits. There's been quite a few in the last 3 or 4 years, people producing, cage systems that are affordable, easy to put together, easy to ship, that allow you to, uh, you know, give that animal a pretty big footprint, good amount of square footage. But yeah, uh, leopard geckos are solitary, only active at night, really in the wild, and quite secretive. So, but you see some really nice dioramas. I'm sure you've seen some where people have taken styrofoam and epoxy and different materials and made big cliff-like things, and the leopard geckos will climb up those, and almost all species of lizards will climb in, if they given the chance. So it gives them some separation, and there's been quite a few people over the last 20 years that have kept family groups of leopard geckos, um, and they'll breed. They don't eat their own babies like people think. I'd even tested that for quite a lot of time, uh, even introducing hatchlings to male and females that didn't produce those babies. Uh, and I think out of all the experiments I did, lost one tail off a hatchling. But, you know, the, sometimes you raise baby leopard geckos together, and if you don't size sort and it's feeding time, and you're keeping 5 or 6 in a blanket box, and they see a tail moving underneath a hide box or styrofoam hide lid, or just get too excited, you can lose a tail or two that way. And I think of all my years, every tens of thousands of babies, only had one instance where uh, one ate another one, and that wasn't good for either one of them. Neither one of them
Right.
made it. So it is fun to keep family group together and give them a soil area where they can bury the eggs. The babies come out on their own. You don't have to worry. Everybody worries so much, their first eggs. I did. And back in 78. And so, it's just uh, the trend towards good systems. But not everybody can do the big caging or give them more space. But uh, one thing that you can do is good nutrition, good bedding material for the egg laying box, like the coconut. It's really super good, and so the health of the animals can make up for a lot. But these bigger geckos, even Leachianus and stuff, they need some space. They need a 4x4 by 2 foot cage, if you can give it at least, and same for Uroplatus and quite a few species like Grandis and so forth. So cool stuff out there.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not like back in the day, I remember you telling that story of you trying to, figure out how to produce and breed leopard geckos, and you just had one male with like 100 females, and looking at different kind of caging and different ways to do things. And we kind of have that history because you and so many other people laid that groundwork of husbandry and care and looking at supplementation and so many different things that go into leopard geckos and breeding. And now we have that to work off of, and we're just really just looking at ways to improve different things and ways to implement new things into enclosures and into rack systems. And there's so many cool ways and so many cool things that you mentioned before that people are introducing. So it's cool to see really the evolution of leopard gecko caging and just reptile caging in general. And who knows what it's going to be like in 10 years.
Exactly. Yeah, I think there's some great things ahead. There's still some combo morphs that are, something that people can latch onto and work on, like, a super giant mandarin tangerine, the kind of thing. Or there's still some goals and cool stuff you can combine, and I imagine there'll be some more genes coming about. Green is a very tough color. It's hard to maintain as an adult, and it's not an easy color to deal with. It's very much polygenic, and not one you can count on. It's just have to do selective breeding, and there's a number of people trying to work on the different lines of the emerald or green or G project type animals. But yeah, I think the future is good. The key is to keep it fun, set a goal. It's pretty easy when people first get into it to kind of do a shotgun effect, and if their budget and space and enthusiasm kind of all come together, it can be quite an explosion of at home of reptiles. And then usually people that are in it for a few years begin to specialize. They see what they like. They see what they're doing is a little different than others, and there's a lot of opportunity to be unique out there. You don't have to follow the herd on any of the different reptile groups or species. So yeah, it's cool stuff. We'll be working with Julie about more ideas, and just keep doing what she is doing. Keep the bandit line strong and breeding true, and keep working on quality and some new combos. And yeah, I think there'll be, one day there's bound to be some kind of, blue color come about, and that would really be something. Who knows when that's going to happen? It might be many, many years from now, or it might be a couple years from now. But I'm not foreshadowing anything here, that we don't have blue geckos over at Julie's. But it's something I was kind of hoping for. I always dreamt about albino leopard geckos, and I'm just really happy it happened during my lifetime, and really feel grateful to be part of it. Yeah, things are looking good. Everybody just should be a good businessman, have good ethics out there, and good things will follow.
Yeah, exactly. And I think when it comes to just leopard geckos and morph making, there's just so many amazing things that haven't been done yet, really. And even with the morphs and the polygenic genes and line bred things that we have into the hobby, we really haven't even touched the surface. And like you just said, blue geckos, like, wouldn't that be awesome to see a blue gecko one day just going around and adding that into eclipse and white and yellow and so many just amazing morphs that we already have. So I can't wait to really just see the future of leopard geckos and morph making over the next, 10 years, and seeing what other colors and genes that we haven't unlocked yet.
Exactly. Yeah, a guy over in Europe I've been helping for several years has got the scaleless geckos, and it's bred true. And he's trying to keep it going there. They're in the morphs book that came out a couple of years ago. So yeah, and then Barry is doing some cool stuff, but he's had some very weird sort of almost kind of a snow gray marble mutation of some
Yeah,
sort.
it's really interesting, like kind of that mishap and what I don't even know how to describe that gecko.
I don't either, frankly. And I think definitely there's some genes there, and it might be something that can enhance some other genes. You never know, and what the combos would be like. But he's got a few of those now, and definitely going to I think continue to breed true. He's, I think, pretty much proved that. So now, and he sent the first pictures to me a while back, and yeah, it's to me. I said, hey, you got to test that, and now he's got more. So looks kind of cool. Looks like something pretty unusual. And uh, let's face it, with dog breeding, I mean, it all started with one genus and species, one morph, the wild type dog, the dingo type dog. And you see when dogs are just sort of in third world countries, they all kind of revert back to that wild form as far as being thinly built, a long muzzle, shorter hair, fast, able to get their food, able to survive. Um, who knows when, some kind of tailless leopard geckos or head morphs, will kind of come about. They've been around. I usually, when I'd have those occur, I just didn't breed those things. I give them away as pets, but who knows when morphology is going to be a change, Evan? I mean, it's happened with the dog breeders, and they're all the same genus and species. But when you look at a pug or a Rottweiler, it's or Saluki is quite something, and nobody has a problem with it. But I'm kind of old school. I think I just like good, strong conformation, and you see some variation in leopard geckos in their conformation. Kind of that stocky, thick look that the black knights have, a little more shorter tail. The hypotangerines being kind of grouchy and quick to bite, and uh, you know, some of the super snow eclipse types having a kind of a more elongated snout, and even some of the snows are like that. So yeah, who knows? You might be 30 years from now doing it with podcast interviews about the new curly tails and this and that. I gave away the curly tail stuff I had and let somebody else play with that. I just gave them away free, and I don't know what came of it really. But anyway, yeah, there's going to be also some new genetics happen and along the way, and I'm just really happy to see so much less crypto out there at the shows. You've probably noticed it too.
Yeah,
There's
definitely.
been a lot less of that epidemic going on, and it used to be you'd go to a show and see 4 or 5 tables with it of people trying to sell sick geckos. Now it's really almost disappeared, and the enigma gene is really faded with time. As far as wanting to work with it all to a great extent. So yeah, good stuff.
Yeah, a lot of great progress happening in the future, and just kind of also just seeing this boom in terms of leopard geckos and new interest from new people coming into the hobby and wanting to learn more about that. But for you, when you were just kind of just breeding just really high yellows, and even when jungles came around, when did you see kind of the first big boom in leopard geckos and people really wanting to get interested into breeding and wanting to get into a piece of leopard geckos that people didn't really understand or notice before?
I would say, in the early 90s, you had the patternless and the snow and the blizzard come about pretty, in the mid 90s. And yeah, things started getting going, and they started seeing that there could be variation like people were seeing in corn snakes and king snakes and at the time. And that really got going because the first pattern deviation I had was not till 91, when I had kind of a hairpin pattern or stripe pattern on a leopard gecko after 12 years of just breeding, and they were just banded, nice looking leopard geckos. And so once we got into the jungle phase and striped and reverse striped, and then a few of these other morphs, and started taking off and building on that, and it was a real increase of interest and stuff starting about all those things were kind of available by 93, and then when the albino came, it just launched everything to another level, and to have three types of albinos and established that they were all different and shouldn't be bred together really was a huge thing. So all that's been really fun to be a part of, really fun to see it. And I think that people can make their mark, keep it going. I had a good time for 42 generations or so.
Yeah, and that's super crazy to even think about. Like 42 seasons of breeding just sounds insane. People mostly only last for a couple years. They get into it just being interested in leopard geckos, and man, 42 years. That's just a insane career to be doing it.
Yeah, I mean, there's been some of my customers over the last 15, 20 years that have stayed in it, and really come on with some cool stuff, and been steadfast, and getting a little more confidence in what they have to offer, and putting it out there. And it's not easy. It's not for everyone when you go public, because then you're opening yourself up to the public and different people's opinions. But you know, let's face it, I enjoyed a life of selling pretty reptiles.
Yeah, and when it comes to, you've obviously seen so much within reptiles. It's almost like, what else do you have left to see? But for you, what else do you feel like you'd like to see in the future when it comes to just reptiles in general, or leopard geckos? Yeah, what do you think is next for herpetoculture?
Yeah, I think one of the big deals is U.S. ARC. It's when you're just starting out, it doesn't seem like something that's real important to think about, laws and rules and legislation and different people's opinions about whether you should be able to have a reptile in a cage or not. So that's really important to guarantee the future and the future for our kids. So a lot of folks out there really have enjoyed uh, keeping and teaching their kids about keeping reptiles and animals, and um, it's nice to be able to pass it on to the next generation. So the having an entity like USARC is not only essential, but really something that everyone should think about and support. Uh, yeah, the right now it seems to me we're going through a wave of so many shows, and you hear it out there that only the show organizer is making money, and but there's a finite level of that. You can only have so many shows, and pretty soon nobody's buying tables and all that, and then the number of shows will get cut back just because of economics. But it's great to see some real traditional shows out there, been around for a long time, different circuits, and I really enjoy seeing all the dry good products. I mean, there's there's a lot of that. Like I said, it's easy to get reptiles, and you have to support them. And it's neat to see some really cool multi water hide box combo plastic products and better quality lighting and all this stuff. I mean, uh, Kevin Beckert and I really worked hard on our reptile habitat to make it multifunctional and the right ventilation and easy to service and can hold water and different configurations. And so, um, I mean, uh, there's room out there for product development. Is what I'm getting at. Uh, you know, for people, and a lot of time it's just been the necessity. A lot of us start keeping reptiles, and oh my gosh, Target or Walmart ran out of my blanket boxes, or I can't make these racks anymore with what's available, and so different companies have popped up. So I think, you know, uh, better housing, more uh, really effective reptile products will keep being developed. Uh, Less shows, but more quality, and not 700-800 tables. It's a point where everybody that's breeding has got a table, but there's only a couple hundred customers, and that can become evident with the show circuit as well. So, and there has to be a balance. It's a business, and out there for a lot of people, and I walked that edge where I had to make it an economic success, be a commercial breeder, but I've always been a hobbyist and professional in things that I do. So yeah, the future is good. There's still a lot of neat ball python morphs that come about. Uh, Tortoise morphs are quite difficult because it takes so many years to grow up tortoises and prove out hets and this and that. But there's a few, albino cherry heads now and albino sulcata and, some morphs in the tortoises a little bit and different locality morph, redfoots and so forth. Clubrid snakes, lots of cool stuff still going on with the different combos and stuff with rat snakes and king snakes and milk snakes. And gosh darn, the hognose thing has really exploded too. I mean,
Yeah,
that
definitely.
is a cool thing. I love hognose. I love catching them. I used to breed the Mexican hognose and the tricolored ones with Brad Chambers. He was my snake curator there for years. Now he's moved from Texas back to upstate New York. Moved all his collection in just last month. So to me, the industry is going to be there as long as some crazy legislation doesn't get passed to drive everything underground and kind of ruin it. So we have to be responsible keepers and not give different organizations a reason to try to take away our freedoms. So yeah, that's part of a democratic country, and I hope the pet industry and reptile hobby can withstand the future in that regard. So
Yeah.
it's all good. I think people like you do a great service. You've been a real quality um, person that has created quality podcasts and interviews that are very objective, very cutting edge, and that is a key component going forward. So I sure hope you stick around for some years, my friend.
Yeah, definitely. I appreciate that, Ron. And yeah, it's great to hear just you just giving so much great advice about legislation. I know that's a huge thing, and also in terms of the hobby and saying there really is growth and there really is some amazing things on the horizon.
And that is going to wrap up this episode of the podcast. Thanks to everyone for listening. I really appreciate Ron for coming and spending his time on the podcast. It was awesome to have him back on. From not having him on for a while, his wisdom and the amount of time he spent within leopard geckos and just herpetoculture in general from his zoo days and even before that to where he is now, retired in Costa Rica. It's super awesome, but everything that he's been through, really just coming and spreading his knowledge and continuing to spread his knowledge to the hobby, and really everything that he's done from paving the way to what he's doing now. It's super awesome, and I'm glad that he's able to continue to come back and be a part of the hobby, still watch how things are going, and still be involved in how he wants to be, which is also super awesome. As you guys know, at the end of each and every show, I do my one big thing. In this episode, I really just want to talk about how Ron talked about the market. Ron has been amazing at marketing just with his geckos and the different projects that he's had, but he's also been good at staying consistent and being a part of the market and just watching the market of leopard geckos from its infancy to the point he basically when he retired. So it's really awesome to see how much longevity he had. He had over 40 generations of leopard geckos and was able to do this as a full-time job and was committed to understanding the market and being patient with the market. I think that's one thing that we all have to be, is just patient when the market is up and down, but also just really study the market. It's one thing from us to really be a part of the market and us studying the market, but are we letting the market teach us? Are we trying to put our own spin on the market, and are we trying to input things into the market and how things should go? So that's just one thing to always look out for, especially when it comes to leopard geckos and how cyclical the hobby can be sometimes and how cyclical the market can be. It's just one good thing that I think I need to work on more a little bit, is really just studying the market and when to buy geckos, when to sell geckos, that kind of thing, and then also looking at price points for certain things as well. Ron has done a great job at doing that, and I think that's just one thing that I took from this episode, really just being patient and being able to ride out some of these waves, but really just understand how the market works, which I think is really important to understand and go back in history, talk to some of these breeders who have been in the hobby for 10 years plus now, and really just pick their brains and see how some of these things work. So that's going to be my one big thing for this episode of the podcast. Again, I want to thank everybody for coming on and joining us for another episode of the podcast. I really appreciate you guys for listening to the podcast. Make sure to tune in next time for our next episode on Spotify, Apple Podcast, iTunes, so many different platforms, and of course YouTube if you guys are watching this on video. Appreciate you guys for that. This is your host, Evan Woolridge. Continue to grow in knowledge and share the strength in Leos.